Hello and good morning to our listeners from around the world. This is Brian Wesley Johnson, and this is This Morning with Soulivity. I'm so glad that you're here with us because we have a lot of important things to talk about today. We hope that you are starting your work week, with a smile on your face and you're ready to get at it. Um, as I said before, this is a time for all of us to create a space to have real conversations about what's going on in our world and in our lives. And today I'm joined by a very special guest, TV host, and collaborators here on Soulivity.com, Sheila Applegate and Teresa Greco. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
I love that. I love that. I love that. I want to remind everybody before we begin that we want your questions, we want your comments, we want you to just post them in the chat, either on Facebook or YouTube, or you can post comments on our other social media platforms as well. We want this to be an interactive conversation and an empowering one as well. We're going to be talking about sometimes some difficult topics, also fun topics at times, but always real conversations that will empower you throughout your day. So, um, we've got a topic that we kind of talked about over the weekend that we wanted to kind of tackle over the first, segment, half hour of our show today. And it's something that you might have read about or seen on cable news this past week. And it's on the advanced placement course focused on African American studies in Florida. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis rejected the proposed course, mainly because according to a report that was released on Friday, that it included topics like the movement for Black lives, Black feminism, and reparations. So I'm going to give you some background and some information on this, and then we'll dive right into our discussion today. Now, the report, which was a one-page document prepared by the Florida Department of Education, questioned the inclusion of certain Black authors and historians whose writings touch on critical race theory and Black communism. For example, the state objected to the inclusion of writing by Robin D.G. Kelly, a professor of American history at UCLA, who warned, and I quote, warns that simply establishing safe spaces and renaming campus buildings does nothing to overthrow capitalism, unquote, according to the document. Now, the state also said that the course framework for the study of reparations, now this is the argument to compensate Black Americans for slavery and other historical atrocities and oppressive acts, includes no critical perspective or balancing option in this lesson. Now, that was part of the course itself. Now, let me give you some quick facts. I know this is a lot, but I want to make sure that we frame all this before we get into, our talk today. Now, the course, which was the first of its kind, was introduced in the fall as a pilot in about 60 schools and will be offered nationwide starting in the 2024-25 school year. It was developed over the last decade and was intended to be a multidisciplinary study of the African American diaspora that includes literature, the arts, science, politics, and geography. Now, this not only would dive into the history of the African content, but also covered uplifting topics such as African American music and the significance of Marvel's Black Panther movie. It looks back at more than 400 years of contributions to the United States by people of African descent, going as far back as 1513, when Juan Gerardo became the first African in North America while on a Spanish expedition on what's now Florida. Now, one important thing is more than 200 institutions have already committed to supporting the AP African American Studies course offered by College Board. Lastly, In a Washington Post editorial, Professor Jonathan Zimmerman says, according to a CBS investigation this year, which was 2020, 7 states do not mention slavery in their state history standards. And he says, should we be surprised then that 44% of high school students in a recent survey did not know that slavery was legal in all of the colonies before the American Revolution? Or that only 8% of students can identify slavery as the cause of the Civil War? So, with that, let's go ahead and dive down into this. I know, Sheila, this was kind of close to your heart. I mean, you recommended this, and I was so happy that you did. Um, what are your thoughts right now? I mean, what was on your mind when you heard about what was happening in Florida?
You know, it's always, these things always come with so many layers of thoughts for me, and probably others too, because we look at it for so many different perspectives. My first reaction was just irritation or rage, I guess, frustration that this, this trend that seems to be at least getting a lot of attention. I don't really believe that it's what the masses want, but the majority of people want. But this trend, which has been our history, like we have as a country suppressed in history and taught this myth for so long, not just of slavery, but of the genocide of indigenous people and in so many different aspects of humanity that has been suppressed and then told a different story. And I've always had this thought of like the world or the United States will it's always about Nazi and Germany. That was always what we were taught and how we were the good people and never let that happen again, instead of looking at what was actually happening here. It always felt like that was a distraction to me.
Right.
So I feel like it's really important to teach the truth. And this seems like great curriculum, and it's frustrating that there's this pushback against it.
Yeah. And Teresa, I remember when we introduced this to you, you had some you had some strong feelings about it as well. What are your thoughts right now?
Well, what came to mind for me was it's ignorance
Yeah.
again, right? That when unless we get educated and informed about the facts, about the truth, about the material, then we can make informed decisions. But I feel like there is, when things like this happen, there is still a layer of ignorance that's out there, because when you hear the information and you get familiar with the facts, that it's it's undeniable. Then it's like, of course people
Yeah.
would need to know about this. But when there is, bias out there, when there is ignorance out there, then it just continues to perpetuate itself. So it's, and I'm, Canadian, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
not,
Mm-hmm.
and so familiar with what happens. But I know that each of your states are so different, right? So
Yeah.
why don't you maybe share a little bit about, I know some information about Florida
Mm-hmm.
with what
Mm-hmm.
we hear up here, and some of the politics around there that we heard that went on, over the pandemic. And so I don't know. I feel like it is it not representative of what Florida's kind of about? I don't know.
Well,
You tell me.
well, yeah. Well, I think what here's a couple of thoughts that I have on that. What's interesting is that long before, I'm just giving some context and history, long before there was what a lot of people understand about Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad actually going north into the Canadian into Canada. There was a southern one that actually went through Florida south into the islands that were Spanish, and that the Spanish who had banned quote unquote slavery were trying to get blacks to leave Florida and come there and be free men and women. And this was I mean, like they were talking about, I mean, the first slaves came into the country in the 16th century in Florida, and that they left there. And I just thought it was ironic that here's a state that's banning history being told about something that is paramount for people to know about that state. But Florida itself is in a political quagmire, I would say. Um, for many years, it was called a swing state. Sheila, Barack Obama won that state in 2008, correct? Did he?
I
I think.
trust you. I don't know.
Yeah, I think he did. But
but I do know
was,
that it's a mixed state versus what
yeah,
we're
it's a
seeing
very
today.
mixed state.
Yeah.
African Americans make up, I think, about 13%. I mean, they make up a strong portion as a minority there, along with, of course, the Latino population, or I should say Latinx population that's there, and that there's rich history, and then over years, in my opinion, there's been efforts to first of all suppress the power of those minorities that are there to swing the vote one way. And as we know from reporting, Ron DeSantis is considering a run for president in 2024, and he has made a pitch to the very hard right for the nomination from the GOP. So I think all of this plays into this, and that this is more about political theater than it is about moving the country forward and telling a quote unquote accurate representation of American history. I'll give you just one example. Since blacks were slaves for this 300 years, since even before the founding of our country, anything that blacks did in response to that, trying to get free, was radical. So if you talk about history in the context of, well, we can't have any radical thought processes from African Americans on the subject of slavery, for example, that would be, in my opinion, crazy. Because these are people who are trying to get free, and that they're bucking the current political system and economic system to do so. So it would be radical. I mean, I don't know of many slaves that were saying, well, we can work out a deal with our plantation owners to, well, we'll be slaves Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then the rest of the week will be free. I don't know that was occurring. So that's just my thought process around that whole, like, what's happening right now in terms of this, especially when you look at that the vast majority of institutions and school districts are going to adopt this AP course in their, for high school. So, Teresa, you had some more?
I just wanted to say that, after I was on the show last Monday, which, we were talking about Martin Luther King Day and
Yeah,
talking about the importance of education and debunking
absolutely.
the
Ding.
myths. I just feel like, this is just another example of where we are, as
Yes.
humans on this planet, right? That we make advances, but then there seems to be like these steps back. and it's like then we see some good progress and celebration, and then again, something like this happens, and it's like, well, you guys are moving, forward as much. But I think that these we will continue have these setbacks when we still have this generation of people on the planet, right? And what we were
Right.
talking about in our discussion is that the younger people that are now coming through have a different perspective, and based on maybe some of the educators that they have in the schools, that they're I want to believe that there's always progress happening, that even though, we still encounter these type of situations that halt progress
Hmm.
in these areas, that I want to believe that there is still steps moving forward. Like even if it's just one person, right? Like I say, that if I can just positively impact just one person every day, and
Yeah.
I want to hope and believe and trust that there is that one person every day. I hope it's more than one, but
Yes.
at the minimum that there is just one. And that Brian talking about this is important because again, these type of things can happen, and if we don't talk about how wrong it is,
Hmm.
it'll just be like, "Oh, okay, it didn't pass. Oh well." Well, no, it's not an oh well, because we are trying to make steps to bring more education to what happened in the past so that people can understand, the present reality of people, around the world, of all colors, of all races, of all religions, of all types. So it's important that we talk about, even though I think this is good, right? Sometimes it's like these things happen. We're like, oh no, no, but it allows us to just, reevaluate and say,
Yeah.
are we really moving forward as much as we need to? What kind of a setback like this? What does it really mean? When you shared a post with us over the weekend, and I read some of the comments, and to be honest, I was like pleasantly, um, I don't know what's the word to say. I was happy to see that there were people, in the comments that, had a problem with it,
Right.
because we
Right.
should
Right.
have a problem with that. And I'm like, okay, good. I'm glad that people are not thinking that this is okay. And and I think that that's important. I think that even something like this, I think the fact that, I know it feels like a big setback, but the fact that people are upset about it also tells you that, there are people that understand that this type of stuff should not continue to happen, and that we
Right.
still have ways to go till we get to that place of equality amongst everybody on earth.
Absolutely. Well said. I like that.
Thank you.
Listen, ladies, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue on this topic. And, because I think it's important that we, dive into this a little bit and, talk about maybe, some ways forward after, after this has kind of died down, I mean, because there's other things that are happening in the world and we want to talk about that as well. So we're going to stay right here on this topic, everybody, and we'll be back in 60 seconds.
Have you ever asked the question, if I was to be anything, what would I be? Regardless of money, regardless of status, beyond popularity and fame. Living your passion, feeling your life has purpose. Soulivity is a space to nurture that which lives in all of us. A place where work can become play, and doing what we love creates the dreams of a lifetime.
And hello and welcome back to This Morning with Soulivity. I'm joined by my very special co-host and collaborator Sheila Applegate and Teresa Greco, and my name is Brian Wesley Johnson. Want to remind everybody we've got some special shows coming up this week. Tomorrow, actually, we have award-winning artist, TV producer, host, and author Shannon Grissom. You might know her from the Sock Monkey journeys and books and other items that are being sold around the world. And also the founder of womenworking.com, author Helene Lerner. She's going to be talking about her new book, Time for Me. We're also going to be doing giveaways this week as well of her books, so stay tuned. There's still time to become a winner. Just go to our Instagram account and repost our post there on your story and comment, and you could be a winner. So, ladies, we're talking about Florida and the ban on the AP African American Studies course there. And Sheila, you had something that you wanted to say about this.
Yeah, I do agree with Teresa. And the phrase that I like is, on a long enough timeline, progressives always win, because humans are progressive creatures. So sometimes the timeline is longer than we want, but we always move forward. So I do definitely agree with that. And Brian, you had talked about this kind of being theatrics for this whole political aspect. And that's definitely, in my opinion, what's going on. And I think, well, to put out there also that they're using this proposed law, which is called Stop Woke. Which is
I mean,
the
really?
lowest level of political commentary, because that has become a term, for those of you out of the United States, that's become a term that's used against people who are progressive, that they're woke. And and the idea, and this, I think, Brian, this, and Teresa, this is one of the things that really hit me in the heart, is that the concept is that they don't want to teach anything that would create people to experience guilt about the way the people who look like them in the past, what their actions were, that would carry mental health issues and guilt for people now, which is, to me, such a ridiculous statement. And I do understand the concept that, self-hatred or whatever is in people, but it's like, when I think it's okay to feel a responsibility from our ancestors, and we didn't take part in that, but we happen to be in this body right now. And because we're in this body, we do benefit from systemic change. And because of that, and the history that we are a part of as part of this country, we have a responsibility. And that's not a bad thing.
No, it's not. It really isn't, Sheila. I think I mean, there's a great series right now about, it's called Through the Grapevine. And it's actually by one of the endorsers of this current AP course, Henry Gates Jr., who is a noted Harvard professor on the African and African American diaspora. I mean, he's had a number of very prominent mini series on Black and Latin America, for instance, as well as his noted regular series on people's genealogy, which is Finding Your Roots. He talks a lot about the fact that, African American history is American history.
Right.
And that it didn't occur immediately after the Civil War, but it occurred something like almost 100 years later, where there was this immediate drive and pushback to reframe the importance of the slavery into the Civil War, into Reconstruction, and that there was this narrative that was created about how the South was, happy, and everybody was just happy down there, and there was no like suffering or anything like that. I mean, you don't have to believe me, folks. You can just go back and watch movies like Gone with the Wind, for example,
Right.
or other movies that talked about the South back then. Um, you know, the real truth about that wasn't even told until recent movies like Glory, and other movies about the Civil War that were being told, really talked about what was happening down there in a more honest light. And so it's important that to your point, Sheila, that we understand and we know what the history is, because, like, for instance, most people don't know that, several decades after the Civil War, African Americans were represented not only locally and at the state level, but also at the national level.
Right.
There were Black representatives in the Congress. I mean, think about that.
Right. Right.
So people talk about, oh, well, these people, like the first Black person to be in Congress in 1960 or 70. No, that's not true. So what happened? There were
Right.
something that happened, and we need to talk about that. So, Teresa,
Right.
you wanted to say?
Yeah, because, one of the points that I made last week was that it's important that we have resources that are actually telling the truth. That
Right.
as an educator, I know the resources that were given to me about particular topics. And now that the truth is coming to light, it's upsetting because
Mhm.
really that's the material that you gave me, that it was, so biased and not reflective of the truth around that material. And that one of the things, we were talking about that, where I think it was Tammy that said, just go back and, and look at history and do some research. And it's like, yeah, absolutely we should, but we should also be able to have access to information that's telling the truth. And that's
Right.
why this is upsetting, because this material has been created like for the now. And it's not this outdated, bias, as you said, as we see on TV and in the movies, which makes it look like, and to say that, even, I mean, there is, and what I loved about what you said is that this material is focusing, on the truth, but like on the not so nice parts as well as the nice parts, right?
Mhm.
That when I
Mhm.
went to Nashville and I went to the Museum of Music, oh my God, that museum was like filled of all of like the country music that went back to folk music, which was all based, in African American musical tradition. And I
Mhm.
was like, oh my God, this is so beautiful, right? And that there were those beautiful aspects that even, let's say, Elvis Presley, with the
Right.
passing of his daughter, right? That a lot of his music had all roots in in Black music. And so
Mhm.
I'm like, it's beautiful that this curriculum is highlighting, both aspects. And and that's why it's upsetting to me, because in particular that I feel like I love the fact that these resources are coming out that is on the latest research. And this is the type of material that people need to have access to, because the stuff that we do that's based from a long time ago is biased and inaccurate.
I
Wow.
agree with you, Teresa. And the thing that is so positive to me about this is that the children of today have the internet. They have an ability
Yes.
to learn, and it is there. And the television and the movies that is available now that does tell the truth, and more and more putting the truth mixed in as even a sub storyline into mainstream television for young people. It's there, it's available. And so when these things come up, as disgusting as it may feel to me that we're having these conversations, the theatrics do benefit the people progressing, because it some people say, no, all attention is good attention, or all, when you're,
Right,
wanting,
right.
I forgot
Hmm.
that phrase, but yeah.
There's no
Uh,
such thing as bad publicity. It's just
Yes, that,
publicity.
right? So
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
publicity. And what is going to get a teenager to search something out more than some very weird, I want to just use bad words right now, but something so ridiculous being said, and even the ridiculousness of the law woke, like what, it's invoking people to learn. And that's where the positive spin is for me,
Yeah.
because the access is there to learn. And yes, there's going to be an undertow of people that just fall into this belief system, but I believe even more will be motivated to learn.
To that point, I want, as always, with this morning, we may talk about things that are hard to discuss and hard to talk about because they can be both politically charged, emotionally charged. But we always want to make sure that we leave our audience with some empowerment. And so, as we were talking about this, I'm glad, Sheila, you talked about learning something, passing on some education, or learning yourself even as an adult, because there's things, I mean, yes, I'm an African American, but I don't know everything about African American history. And I still read, I still learn. And so I just wanted to go through a couple of things that the Connections Academy by Pearson talks about, how teachers specifically, but even parents or adults, can learn about Black history and culture here in America. And so, these are just some of the things that kind of stood out to me. One is, of course, read a book about the African American experience, history, and culture. Black History Month is next month in February, coming up in a few days, and we'll be talking about some important aspects of that with some people. But there's tons of terrific books that are out in the ether on Amazon or in your local library that talk about African Americans and the importance of their lives to American history. Another is watch a documentary. There's tons of documentaries, specifically like on PBS, that offer exploration into Black history and culture. I mean, you can relive iconic moments like the 1963 March on Washington, or you can join the Freedom Riders on their journey through Jim Crow South. Most of this stuff is available for both middle and high school students. So that's a great way to learn. Um, you can virtually visit the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Ladies, did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, so you can virtually go. It's here. It's part of the Smithsonian Institute. It's on the National Mall, and they have a wealth of online learning resources to help you learn more about the African American experience. And there's even free interactive lessons that you can explore both well-known and not so well-known moments in history. Another easy one: watch a movie showcasing African American history or experiences. We talked about Glory. I mean, there's other movies that are out here that are part of it. I mean, one really good movie, but it's hard to watch, is Rosewood, that talks about how Black Meccas at the beginning of Jim Crow South were basically, torn down. And so you get an idea that Black people, yes, there were some poor, but there was also people who came together and formed towns like in Tulsa and in the Mississippi valleys and other places around the country. Also, honor African American veterans. I mean, most people don't know that over 200,000 African Americans served in the U.S. Army from 1863 to 1865, and they made up nearly 10% of the American soldiers that served in the Civil War. And so there's a long history of African American veterans that are there. And one other great thing is listen to a TED Talk. There are great presentations that are on the TED network that includes things that are, again, coming up in Black History Month. But as people in my community say, Black History Month is 12 months long. So so you can learn more about African American history and culture and experiences, and inventors and a whole bunch of other important aspects of American history by just listen to people talk about it. So
Thank
any
you.
final
Thank you so
thoughts?
much. Thank you so much for sharing all of those. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. It really
Yeah.
is that,
Yeah.
as Sheila said, we have access to so many different avenues of resources. And then, you just went out and talked about a whole bunch, whether
Yeah.
you want to watch it on TV, whether you want to read about it, whether you want to look at it on the internet, whether
Right. Right.
whatever kind of suits your fancy. There's
Right.
a way of being able to get more informed. And so thank you so much for sharing all of those, because
Yeah.
I hope that we can encourage people to do a little bit of that. And as you said, not just, it's unfortunate that we have to designate a month of the year to do that, because we should be educating ourselves and learning and moving forward and growing and expanding all the time. But if people needed an excuse to definitely maybe take advantage of at least one of those things that you shared next month.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And again, American history doesn't stop in 1 month. It goes throughout the whole year. And so these are things that people can take advantage of and learn more about the truth of what was happening during those times. I mean, just read about it. Don't take information from somebody just on Twitter or or other places. There's plenty of resources that people have put together for decades now that you can take advantage of. So listen, we're going to close this topic out, and when we come back, we're going to come to Sheila because she's got another topic that we can talk about. But we're going to take a quick pause for the cause, and we'll be back in about 60 seconds.
You can find all the Satonic products at our Go shop on Soulivity at go.soulivity.com now. Shop for beauty products, skincare, hair care. It is all there at the Go shop. Go shop Soulivity.
And welcome back to This Morning with Soulivity. My name is Brian Wesley Johnson, and I'm joined by some beautiful ladies or beautiful souls, Sheila Applegate and Teresa Greco. Hello, ladies.
Hey there.
I'm so glad you guys are here. Sheila, you had a great topic that you wanted to share with our audience today.
I do. I was all excited to talk about the Lunar New Year. And of course, now we have a layered conversation, deeper than I had expected. But let's start with the fact that over this weekend, it's the celebration of the Lunar New Year, which is what most Asian communities celebrate as their new year. I happen to love that because it cycles on the moon and not
Yeah.
on some man-made calendar of when we should celebrate a new year. But although I guess it is convenient to know that we always start with January 1st. But as far as the cycles, I do think that we have energy cycles that go in accordance with our rotation and with the moon cycle. So one of the cool things about this is that the moon is actually over the weekend it was a new moon, which means we couldn't see it, but it's the closest new moon that there has been in hundreds of years. And
Wow.
the next one that will be this close will be in 2368.
What?
So, yeah, like
Say
that's
that
it. That's
again?
our next one. So with that, see,
Wow.
I'm not huge on all of astrology and everything as far as like I feel when things are, affecting possibly, but I don't have a lot of information on it. But the lunar cycle and where the moon is makes a lot of sense to me because we know that the moon regulates the cycles of the ocean of
Mhm.
water. So
Mhm.
that's what creates the tides and the movement. So we know the energetic or magnetic effect it has on water. And like we said last week in one of our shows, what we are made up of primarily water. So there's
Right.
going to be this huge high tide, or there was this huge high tide as the moon got so close. And we think about what that brings up inside of us, the movement. And so also knowing that, I also had the experience as a social worker for so many years of realizing, and I think people in law enforcement and hospitals also have found this, like the moon makes a difference. Your things happen at the full moon. Things happen at different points in the cycle. So we behave differently with the intensity of the moon. And that's all exciting. And we could talk.
Yeah.
We're moving into the year of the rabbit, which is also exciting. And then, of course, we
Yeah.
have another piece of news to add to that. But I'll let you guys talk now.
Sheila, I was thinking about when you were talking about this. I remember, and I love National Geographic. Oh my God. I'm such a nerd, but I love it. Um, there was these scientists, and I can't remember it's a specific title, but basically these scientists go into mountains and they put microphones deep in the crevices of the mountains to to listen to the sounds that are there. Well, guess what they found out? That not
What?
only did the moon affect the oceans, but they affected the mountains as well.
Nice. Of
And that
course,
they
right?
affect all the
Yeah.
buildings. And so places like most people don't realize that in places like New York City, the and other major cities around the globe, when the moon passes over, the city actually rises and falls. And it can rise as much. I think they said it was something crazy, something like 6 inches or something like that, but it rises up. But you don't feel it. You just
Mm.
kind of like walking because it's so slow. But I thought that was
Wow.
like, it's important for us to realize that these astral bodies that are out in space, specifically that are close to us, like that are that have gravity, like the moon, affect everything that we do. And so, I'm glad that these concepts are coming, to the forefront more and more and more, and that it's being studied more and more and more. Because I thought that was fascinating, that the
Yeah.
mountains have this song that happens every night, and that it's measurable. And so I was just thinking about that. Okay, the nerdy part of me was like, oh, that National
Yeah.
Geographic special. They're talking about the moon, you know.
But that stuff is so cool, and to put the pieces together and say, yeah, these ideas we have are based in science.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Teresa, what are you thinking about all this? I know you
I'm
love this stuff too.
Yeah, me too. And because everything is energy. And so
Mm-hmm.
when, I'm listening to you both speaking, I'm like, there's just that confirmation again that everything is energy and we're all interconnected. There's this amazing science that just came out that, I watched actually, I know ironically on a TikTok video, but and it was that science has now proven that everything is interconnected, that um I don't know if it had to do, I think it went even like smaller than particle, like literally just like the energy, not even, something as small as a particle, like even just smaller than that. And that everything is interconnected. So it makes so much sense that, whatever the moon is doing, that it's having an impact on everything else. And
Mm-hmm.
that, you sharing what's happening in the mountains is like, there's another layer of that impact and that interconnectedness. And if only people could realize that we are all interconnected, that though we all look separate, we are not, that the energy that is in everything is in us, that is in nature, is in inanimate objects. We are connected to everything, that everything is vibrating. Inanimate objects still have an energy, although not vibrating, very quickly. If we think of like particle theory with science, we know that even in inanimate objects there's energy, but because those particles are so closely knit, it doesn't move as quickly as other material objects. And so if we could only know that, and understand that we're all interconnected, that what we do to something also affects us because we're connected to that. You're like affecting the whole, that when we help the whole, we're helping ourselves. And when we hurt others, we're also hurting ourselves because we're all connected. So this for me is an example of that interconnectedness of everything and everyone. It's beautiful.
Mm. That was again nicely stated, my dearest. Nicely
Mhm.
stated.
Thank you.
Um, and Sheila, you wanted to talk about, I think there's, well, not that there's an other side of this, but something that was also reported in the news over the
Right.
last few
So,
days.
yeah, I do. I think it's a dichotomy that we see. And we're talking about the energy affecting everything. And we had what happened on Saturday night while people were celebrating
Yeah. Yeah.
New Year's Eve in what was the city?
Yeah,
Monterey,
it's Monterey Park,
Monterey
California.
Park. Yeah.
And just so everybody knows where that it's part of Los Angeles County. It's just east of East LA. So it's a suburb of or a neighborhood of Los Angeles that has a lot of Asian Americans that live there. And so I mean, first and foremost, before we go into, just for all of us, we want to send our prayers, support, and condolences to the families of the ones that had transitioned that day. And we also want to send our love and
Mhm.
support and prayers to the remaining wounded that are still in hospital. And we wish them a speedy and healthy recovery. And so Sheila, yeah, I mean, so yeah, so you had this celebration, but this also happened during the same period. What were your thoughts about, I mean, that dichotomy?
Well, let's say what happened, that there was a shooting,
Yeah,
right? A mass
yeah, there was
shooting.
a shooting.
Um, and I believe 5 people were killed and there's still some
No,
wounded.
10.
10,
Sorry, I read 10.
10
People have been
people.
10.
killed now? Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
10 and 10
Yeah.
injured. I was just looking it up. Yeah.
Well, if we want to be specific now, it was 10 people that were killed by a shooter who also committed suicide.
Mhm.
And
Right.
so
So
there
there's
was
some
11 total
differences.
deaths
Mhm.
from the incident itself, and it's heartbreaking, um, especially during that type of celebration. And
Right.
apparently, I guess the shooter was also Asian. as well, Asian
Mhm.
American. Um,
And 72 years old, I believe, right?
yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, they do. There's no motive right now around it. Um, that they can that
Right. I
the
think.
they're investigating it and that kind of thing. Um, but it's just interesting. Um, I struggle sometimes when these things happen, and I know I know there's a higher meaning in all this, but sometimes it's hard to figure out.
Mhm. Yeah.
And maybe we're not supposed to figure it out. I
And I
don't know.
think we want to put things into a box. I mean, one article I read said it was domestic violence. And then my brain can say, okay, so we know that people who commit domestic violence are more likely to become mass shooters. And can we do something there? But I think it's just it's a wound that is deep in, or it's it's a commonality in the United States above any other country. And so not getting into what the solution is, but
Right.
can we just all agree to begin with, we don't need to live like this. This
Yeah.
doesn't have to be normal.
Right. I mean, Teresa, you're our neighbor. You're in our neighboring country to the north, and I do not hear about mass, incidents like this
No, they're
happening.
not. Yeah, they're not as common as, but I mean, you guys have way more people than us, so,
True.
population-wise, so that makes sense. So yeah, luckily it's not as common. But it's, and I think when we were kind of talking about what we wanted to discuss on this morning's show, I said that I tend not to watch a lot of news
Right.
because
Right.
for me it's upsetting. And yes, this is a morning show too, so we want to be able to talk about some of the current events, but then talking also about how do we navigate the things that are happening on earth that aren't pleasant and aren't reflective of our true nature, which is love, peace, and happiness. That's who we really are. So when these things happen, we know that some people on the planet are very far from their essential self, very
Yeah.
far from home. Because
Yeah.
if they were home to who they really are, they would never do these things that we see. And that when it come, obviously I want to still remain aware. And so it's these situations that they don't bring up anger inside of me at all. I feel so much compassion for these people in that if you were aligned with the truth of who you were, you would never hurt other people because, as I was just saying, we are all
Y-
interconnected.
Yeah.
And that when you
Yeah.
hurt others, you are hurting yourself. But this is how much pain these
Yeah.
people are in, and that therefore in they can only give from who they are, and their actions are a reflection of what's happening inside of them. And so we have to show some compassion. We have to also respond to these situations with love. And that, yes, of course, this is hard to do, but our essential self is love,
Right.
peace, and happiness. And so, how can we continue to stay us that are connected to that? It's ever more important that we continue to share our light and love with others, especially when in these times of need, and to understand that unfortunately the consciousness of the planet, this is what it still means to be human, that these things are happening on earth, and that those of us that are connected to our light, that we need to not let these things I look at it with this analogy of my light and my body and everything is a vessel of that light, and if I allow these things to puncture the vessel, then the light is going to come out of these holes and leave less light inside of the vessel. And so I have to
Yeah.
ensure that I am not allowing these things. to puncture, and that I stay connected to that. And so that I always have from a full vessel in order to continue to share the light and love, because we
You,
know that ultimately the love and the light wins out.
Teresa, I want to thank you for that because through you talking about the truth of who we are, right? I mean, the three of us have the very similar philosophy that, we're spiritual beings living a human experience. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about the what happened like last night when they were doing the report. People had come together to love on each other and support each other. And that in of itself is our true nature.
Mhm.
And that was a reflection of it. And the key aspect of that we're supposed to learn, in my opinion, is that's the state that we need to maintain more of all the
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
Because I look at this, even the shooter, what resources were there to support that shooter or that man before the act was committed? Did we, because a lot of times if this was a mental health issue, mental health and support around people who are in pain is lacking a lot of times. And that, especially if you're poor. And so, as I was just hearing your words, and Sheila, you too, what came to my heart was, man, if we could just maintain that level of compassion for each other that always happens after these incidents,
Mhm.
then what a change would come about in our world. And
Mhm.
Sheila, I'll go to you for the last word.
Well, I think what you both said is spot on, because we so quickly want to say, well, why? And and then go from that direction. We're never going to know why he committed
Mhm.
suicide. And so any speculation that we come up with is not going to be anything but a speculation. But the compassion, moving to that compassion, I do believe ultimately things change from the down. And so when we stay in the space of love and compassion, we are able to take actions that will help to bring us in a new direction. I do think that we live in a world of polarity and the dichotomy
Yeah.
Mhm.
that is part of the Earth experience. We spoke about the moon and all of its beauty. I still want to talk about some of the wonderful things that are coming moon and this cycle that we're having right on this Lunar New Year. But we also know that in itself could have been put him over the edge.
True.
If
Exactly.
he was all and that influence that is fund our human concept. So because it moves things, you even said it shook the mountain, and right now it's all about shaking what's been buried and bringing that up to the
Mhm.
surface. So um, as sad as it is, we all have a role to play in this dichotomy that we live in. And so with that, can I just switch over and say, let's look at some of the positives that the new year brings in. It's called the
Absolutely.
year
Go
of the
for it.
rabbit, which is, it speaks about prosperity and abundance and deepening relationships, fast movement. And I do know that there's an energetic shift that has happened over these last weeks that is profound. And I look forward to experiencing that in all the ways that we can as humans. And this is one last little tidbit that just blew my mind away because I didn't hear it before. A lot of the Asian people, like we see the man in the moon, and we learn and we see the face of the moon. They see a rabbit. That's the
Wow.
at or that's what they talk about. And so I looked up pictures of it and tried to see as many, get that image in my head. So as soon as there's the next full bright moon, I'm going to go look for the rabbit in the moon.
Let's all look for the rabbit. I think that will be healthy for all of us. Thank you, ladies, for such a great show. First and foremost, we want to remind everybody that coming up on Wednesday is another Consciously Awesome Living with Sheila Applegate at noon right here on our social media platforms. And on Thursday, there's another Steps to Happiness with Teresa Greco with another fantastic guest. You can learn more about Sheila Applegate by going to her website at SheilaApplegate.com. And Sheila, what's going on this week? What goodies are you offering our audience?
We have a discount for soul connection sessions that you can get through Soulivity, and we'll post the link on the site for you to see. But if you come over, individual session with me with a discount.
Fantastic. And Teresa,
I'm going to California, so that's all I got.
Oh yeah. Going to California. Isn't that a song? Anyway, Teresa, I know you've got some good stuff too that you're going to be offering on the Aspire platform, but can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so there's going to be 2 courses that are going to be available for you to check out on Aspire. One is going to be the 8-week Steps to Happiness group coaching course that you can be a part of, where each week for an hour we're going to talk about some of those different steps that you can take to live happier lives. And the second course is going to be for those who may be interested in becoming life coaches. So if you are one of those that are thinking, wow, what is this? What does being a life coach entail? This particular course is great because the idea is that we need to flourish in our own life before we can help others to flourish, and those around us to flourish. That it must happen within us first. So this course really does give people the individual steps to take first, and then at that point you can decide if you want to actually help others to do the same, and then there's opportunities to build on top of that. Also, if people are in careers where they find themselves acting as coaches, so managers, people in HR, they naturally coach others, and this course would actually give you some of those tools that you can implement in your present.
Fantastic. This is all good. I love it. Listen, we're a little bit over time, but I just want to say, on behalf of all of us, I want to say thank you for joining us for another episode of This Morning with Soulivity. We hope that you come back and join us every weekday at 8 a.m. Eastern, or listen to the rebroadcast at 11 a.m. Eastern for all of you on the West Coast. And see, until next time, keep on having those real conversations with passion and purpose, and create a life full of high quality living today. We'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye. See you. Have a great day.
This work is subject to copyright owned by Affinity Global LLC. Any reproduction or republication of all or part of this is expressly prohibited unless Affinity Global LLC has explicitly granted its prior written consent. All other rights reserved.